homicide of Laken Riley became a nationally recognized criminal case due to the speed with which evidence was uncovered and the clarity of the investigative record that followed. On February 22, 2024, Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student, was killed while jogging near the University of Georgia campus in Athens, Georgia. The incident occurred in a public recreational area frequently used by students and residents, which immediately raised concerns regarding campus safety and law enforcement response. From the outset, the case was not defined by uncertainty over what occurred, but by how quickly digital, physical, and forensic evidence converged to establish a detailed timeline of events. Within hours of the reported disappearance, law enforcement identified a confined search area using cell phone location data, smartwatch records, and witness accounts. Surveillance footage from nearby buildings documented movements both before and after crime, while physical evidence recovered from the scene and surrounding locations provided corroboration. This combination allowed investigators to reconstruct the sequence of events with unusual precision for a case of this nature. As details emerged, the case extended beyond a local homicide investigation. Public reporting and official statements placed it at the center of broader discussions involving criminal accountability, prosecutorial discretion, and immigration enforcement. Despite these wider implications, the underlying matter remained a single criminal act examined to establish investigative and legal procedures. Laken Riley was a 22-year-old nursing student whose life, routines, and personal goals were documented in detail during the investigation and subsequent court proceedings. She was described in official records and testimony as disciplined, health-conscious, and highly committed to her education. In May 2023, Riley transferred from the University of Georgia in Athens to the nursing program at Augusta Medical College, a decision made to advance her long-term goal of working in pediatric care. Academic records and statements from family and peers indicated that she viewed nursing not simply as a profession, but as a vocation centered on service, responsibility, and care for vulnerable patients, particularly children. Riley lived near the University of Georgia campus in Athens with 3 roommates. The household followed predictable routines shaped by academic schedules, part-time work, and shared responsibilities. Among Riley's most consistent habits was running, which she incorporated into her daily life as both physical exercise and personal routine. She typically ran 3 to 6 times per week and was familiar with the intramural fields, trails, and wooded paths near Lake Herrick. This area was well known to her and commonly used by students for jogging, walking, and other outdoor activities. There was no evidence that she regarded the location as unsafe or unfamiliar. She frequently ran with one of her roommates, Connolly, who was identified during testimony as her regular running partner. On some occasions, Riley ran alone, particularly in the mornings when class schedules differed. Her runs often included listening to music through wireless earbuds or speaking by phone with family members, most commonly her mother. These habits were consistent in routine, suggesting no unusual circumstances or deviations in behavior leading up to the day of the crime. Friends and family described Riley as reliable and communicative. She routinely responded to messages and calls promptly, especially during daytime hours. This pattern became a critical factor on the morning of February 22, 2024, when her lack of response raised concern among those close to her. Her roommates testified that it was out of character for her to be unreachable for extended periods without explanation. This behavioral consistency contributed to the rapid recognition that something was wrong when she failed to return from her run. Beyond academics and exercise, Riley was reported to be closely connected to her family, particularly her younger sister, whom she was described as supporting and mentoring. Statements provided during the sentencing phase of the trial emphasized her role as a dependable presence within her family and social circle. She was also described as active in her church community, where she participated regularly and maintained strong personal relationships. There was no evidence presented that Riley had any prior contact, dispute, or relationship with the individual later convicted of her murder. Investigators and prosecutors emphasized that she was selected at random, with no prior interaction or connection established through digital records, witness testimony, or physical evidence. This absence of prior association reinforced a conclusion that the crime was not targeted based on personal knowledge, but occurred during the course of an ordinary activity in a familiar environment. The victim background presented in court established Riley as a person engaged in normal, structured routines, with clear future plans and consistent habits. These details were not introduced to generate sentiment, but to provide factual context for understanding the circumstances under which the crime occurred. Her background underscored the events of February 22, 2024, interrupted an ordinary morning shaped by routine, predictability, and long-term personal goals. On the morning of February 22, 2024, Laken Riley followed a routine that closely matched her established habits. At approximately 9:03 a.m., she left her residence near the University of Georgia campus to begin a jog to the intramural fields and connected trail system near Lake Herrick. Weather conditions were not identified as unusual, and there was no indication that she altered her route or schedule. Surveillance cameras positioned along Millage Avenue Extension captured Riley shortly after she began running. The footage showed her moving southbound, holding her cell phone in her left hand, with white wireless earbuds visible in her ears. This imagery aligned with her known practice of listening to music or using her phone while jogging. Approximately 2 minutes into her run, Riley was recorded continuing toward the trail network that extends east toward the wooded area near the train tracks. At 9:05 a.m., additional camera footage documented her progressing along the established jogging path. At this stage, there was no visible sign of distress or interruption. Her pace appeared steady and consistent with recreational jogging. No other individuals were clearly identified interacting with her in the available footage during this early portion of the run. 6 minutes after passing the bus stop area, Riley's Garmin smartwatch recorded a sudden and complete stop in movement. The data reflected an abrupt change from continuous motion to stillness, rather than a gradual slowdown. Investigators later noted that this transition was inconsistent with voluntary rest or routine stretching. Within moments of the stoppage, the emergency SOS feature on her cell phone was activated. The phone placed a call to 911, which connected briefly with an emergency operator. The recorded call lasted approximately 1 minute. During that time, the audio captured limited and unclear sound. There were muffled voices, followed by noises consistent with physical movement and multiple dull impacts. The caller did not verbally communicate with the dispatcher. The call ended abruptly when the connection was lost. Subsequent attempts by the emergency operator to call back were unsuccessful, as the phone did not reconnect. The timing of the call, paired with the smartwatch data, became central to the reconstruction of events. Following the initial stop recorded by the smartwatch, location and movement data indicated that Riley remained alive and moving for several minutes. The smartwatch continued to register physiological activity, including a heartbeat, until approximately 9:28 a.m., 17 minutes after the cessation of her run. During this interval, the data showed movement away from the main trail and deeper into the wooded area adjacent to the intramural fields. Investigators later assessed that this movement could not be explained by routine jogging behavior. Cell phone location data showed that Riley's phone remained within a confined area near the trails for an extended period after the SOS call. The device did not travel any significant distance following the initial movement into the woods. This stationary location later guided both civilian search efforts and the official law enforcement response. At the time these events were occurring, Riley's roommates and family members were unaware of the emergency call or the interruption to her run. Her regular running partner, Connolly, was attending classes and did not accompany her that morning. The absence of immediate witnesses and the brief nature of the 911 call meant that the seriousness of the situation was not recognized until hours later, when Riley failed to return home and could not be reached by phone or message. Concern regarding Laken Riley's whereabouts developed gradually over the late morning hours of February 22, 2024, as repeated attempts to contact her went unanswered. Riley was known to respond promptly to messages and calls, particularly during the daytime. When this pattern did not hold, her roommates began to reassess the situation. At first, some uncertainty existed due to a temporary cellular service disruption affecting certain devices connected to the same provider. However, it soon became clear that the service issue did not apply uniformly, and Riley's phone remained capable of receiving calls. By approximately 11 a.m., her roommates determined that her prolonged silence could not be explained by technical issues or schedule changes. One roommate returned to the residence and confirmed that Riley had not come back from her morning run, using the share location feature on their phones. They identified that Riley's device had remained stationary near the intramural fields for several hours. The lack of movement from a location she would normally pass quickly heightened their concern. Two roommates, later identified in official records as Lily and Sophia, decided to search the area themselves before waiting for further direction. They followed the route Riley was known to use, moving toward the wooded section near Lake Herrick. Accompanied by a dog, they walked off one of the main trails into the leaves and brush near the location indicated by the phone data. During this search, the dog alerted to an object partially concealed in the leaf cover. The item was a single white wireless earbud, consistent with those Riley was known to use. Recognizing the significance of the discovery, the roommates contacted emergency services at approximately 12:07 p.m. During the call, they reported that their roommate had gone for a run around 9 a.m., had not returned, and could not be reached by phone. They also reported the recovery of the earbud near her last known location. The dispatcher collected identifying information and relayed the call to responding officers. University of Georgia Police Department personnel were dispatched to the area and began an organized search of the intramural fields and surrounding trails. Sergeant Kenneth Maxwell obtained a screenshot of Riley's phone location and shared it with colleagues to focus the search area. Officers followed the trail network toward the wooded section near Lake Herrick, maintaining visual scans of the terrain off the main paths. At approximately 12:38 p.m., Sergeant Maxwell located Riley's body beneath a large tree, roughly 64 feet from a nearest trail. She was found on the ground, partially concealed by leaves and natural debris. She was unresponsive and not breathing. Officers immediately attempted to render medical assistance until emergency medical services arrived. EMS personnel also attempted resuscitation, but determined that she was deceased upon assessment. Visible injuries included trauma to the left side of her head. The ground surrounding her showed signs of disturbance, including displaced leaves and soil. Two rocks were located nearby, each bearing visible blood. Subsequent testing confirmed the blood belonged to Riley. These objects were preserved as potential weapons. Riley's cell phone was not immediately located at the body site. It was recovered several hours later under a different tree at a measurable distance from where her body was found. Investigators later noted that without prior knowledge of its general location from digital data, the phone may not have been recovered at all. The discovery of the body transformed the search effort into a homicide investigation, prompting expanded forensic processing and the involvement of additional investigative agencies. Following the discovery of Laken Riley's body, law enforcement formally designated the scene as a homicide investigation and implemented evidence preservation protocols. The immediate area surrounding the body, including the nearby trails and wooded terrain, was secured to prevent contamination. Officers from the University of Georgia Police Department coordinated with the Athens-Clarke County Police Department and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to expand the scope of the inquiry. The investigation focused on reconstructing Riley's movements, identifying potential witnesses, and locating any physical or digital evidence connected to the attack. Forensic personnel documented the scene in detail. The disturbed ground, displaced leaves, and proximity of blood-stained rocks suggested a physical struggle had occurred in the wooded area. Autopsy findings later established that Riley suffered significant blunt force trauma to the head. Medical examination also indicated signs consistent with asphyxiation, leading investigators to conclude that death was not caused by a single mechanism alone. The medical examiner reported that the combination of injuries reflected a sustained assault rather than an accidental fall or isolated blow. Riley's clothing was documented as being in a state of disarray at the time she was found. Investigators assessed his condition in conjunction with other evidence and determined that an attempted sexual assault was likely. However, forensic examination did not establish that a rape had been completed. This distinction was reflected in the charges ultimately brought against the suspect, which included assault with intent to rape, rather than a completed sexual offense. A systematic search of the surrounding area was conducted. Officers canvassed the trails, interviewed individuals present in the park, and collected surveillance footage from nearby buildings, apartment complexes, and public infrastructure. Investigators also examined trash receptacles and dumpsters within walking distance of the crime scene, operating on the assessment that items used in the attack could have been discarded shortly afterward. A significant breakthrough occurred when officers inspected a large blue recycling bin located at the far end of a parking lot near a nearby apartment complex. Inside the bin, officers observed a dark-colored jacket that appeared recently discarded. The jacket had visible bloodstains and several long brown hairs entangled around one of its buttons. The item was recovered and sent for forensic testing. Laboratory analysis confirmed that the blood on the jacket matched Riley. A total of 29 hairs were collected, many of which showed characteristics consistent with having been forcibly removed from the scalp. Additional items were located in bushes near the same apartment complex, including 3 black disposable kitchen gloves. One glove had a tear near the thumb area. Testing later confirmed the presence of Riley's blood on the gloves. These findings suggested the gloves had been worn during the assault and discarded immediately afterward. Investigators reviewed doorbell camera footage from an apartment overlooking the recycling bin. The footage showed a male individual approaching the bin at approximately 9:44 a.m. on the morning of the homicide, approximately 15 minutes after Riley's smartwatch recorded the cessation of her heartbeat. The individual was seen briefly removing a black Adidas cap, examining it, and place it back on before discarding the jacket. He then moved along the side of the building, stopping to discard additional items in nearby bushes. This combination of forensic evidence, video footage, and precise timing significantly narrowed the pool of potential suspects. The investigative focus shifted toward identifying the individual captured on camera and establishing his movements before and after the crime. The identification of the suspect in the killing of Laken Riley followed directly from convergence of video evidence, forensic findings, and proximity to the crime scene. On the morning after the homicide, officers conducting follow-up patrols near the apartment complex adjacent to the intramural fields observed a man wearing a black Adidas cap that appeared visually identical to the cap worn by the individual recorded on doorbell footage discarding the blood-stained jacket. The man was identified as Diego Ibarra, a resident of the complex. During the initial interaction, officers noted irregularities in the identification documents he presented, prompting further inquiry into the household. Investigators learned that Diego Ibarra lived with his brother, Jose Antonio Ibarra, age 26, along with other occupants. When Jose Ibarra emerged during an encounter, officers observed multiple visible scratches on his hands, arms, neck, and later on his back. These injuries were consistent with recent physical struggle. When questioned, Jose Ibarra provided explanations that investigators later characterized as implausible or contradictory. He initially attributed redness on his knuckles to cold exposure and denied awareness of the scratches despite their visibility. The absence of credible explanation raised immediate concern, particularly when viewed alongside the timing of the injuries and the nature of crime under investigation. A search warrant was obtained for the apartment. Inside, officers located black disposable kitchen gloves, similar to those recovered in the bushes near the dumpster. These gloves matched in appearance and type, but were not individually distinctive. Their presence, however, reinforced the evidentiary link between the apartment and the discarded items found near the crime scene. At the police station, both Diego Ibarra and another resident identified Jose Ibarra as the individual seen in the doorbell footage discarding the jacket. They further confirmed that Jose had been wearing Diego's Adidas cap on the morning of February 22, 2024. Digital evidence added substantial weight to these identifications. Investigators recovered photographs from Jose Ibarra's cell phone taken at approximately 4:30 a.m. and again at 5:37 a.m. on the morning of the homicide. In these images, he appeared wearing the same black Adidas cap and dark jacket, later recovered from the recycling bin. Forensic testing confirmed that both items contained Laken Riley's blood. Additional doorbell camera footage from neighboring apartments captured Jose Ibarra's movements during the night before and the morning of the crime, showing him wearing the same clothing until after the homicide occurred. Forensic analysis provided the most direct connection. A latent fingerprint recovered from Riley's cell phone screen was identified as a left thumbprint belonging to Jose Ibarra. DNA recovered from underneath Riley's fingernails was also matched to him. These findings explain the scratches observed on his body and place him in direct physical contact with the victim during the struggle. There was no forensic evidence indicating that any other individual had contact with Riley at the time of the assault. From an analytical standpoint, the suspect identification phase stands out for its lack of ambiguity. Many homicide investigations rely on circumstantial inference layered over incomplete data. In this case, the identification rested on mutually reinforcing forms of evidence: video, digital records, eyewitness confirmation, and forensic science. While no single element alone would have been sufficient to eliminate all doubt, their combined presence met and exceeded the evidentiary threshold required for criminal prosecution. The case demonstrates how rapid evidence preservation and cross-verification can reduce uncertainty early, limiting the opportunity for alternative narratives to take hold. The trial of Jose Antonio Ibarra commenced following his formal indictment on multiple counts, including malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping, hindering a 911 call, and assault with intent to rape. The prosecution, led by Special Prosecutor Sheila Ross, presented a comprehensive case that integrated digital records, forensic evidence, eyewitness testimony, and surveillance footage, all of which collectively established a clear chronology of the events leading to Laken Riley's death. The case was heard before Athens-Clarke County Superior Court Judge H. Patrick Haggard, following the defendant's decision to waive a jury trial, a strategic choice reportedly made to mitigate the potential influence of public notoriety and pretrial media coverage. During the proceedings, digital evidence played a central role. GPS pings from Riley's smartwatch and cell phone, coupled with Ibarra's mobile device activity, were used to reconstruct the sequence of movements. These data points indicated that Riley remained on the trail for several minutes after her abrupt stoppage, consistent with a physical struggle, and that Ibarra's phone remained within the vicinity of the crime scene at the same time. Surveillance footage corroborated these movements, showing Ibarra discarding the blood-stained jacket and gloves near the apartment complex, as well as images captured prior to crime, depicting him wearing clothing later matched to forensic evidence. Forensic testimony was presented in detail. Laboratory analysis confirmed that the jacket and gloves contained Laken Riley's blood. DNA recovered from underneath her fingernails matched Ibarra, and his left thumbprint was identified on her cell phone screen. Medical testimony from the autopsy described a combination of blunt force trauma and asphyxiation as contributing to the cause of death. These findings were presented in conjunction with eyewitness identification from the apartment residents, who confirmed Ibarra's presence in the dumpster footage. The prosecution emphasized a sequence of injuries and discarded items to demonstrate intent and the premeditated nature of the attack. The defense attempted to challenge portions of the evidence, arguing that some video footage could have depicted Ibarra's brother, Diego, and questioning the exclusivity of cell phone possession. However, the cross-verification of digital timestamps, forensic results, and multiple independent camera sources limited the effectiveness of these challenges. Testimony from law enforcement and forensic specialists reinforced the singularity of Ibarra's presence at the critical locations, and no evidence emerged suggesting that another individual had physically interacted with Riley at the time of the assault. Following deliberation, Judge Haggard rendered a verdict of guilty on all counts. Sentencing was conducted with consideration of the severity of the attack, the demonstrated intent, and the risks posed to public safety. Ibarra was sentenced to life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. The decision not to seek the death penalty was noted in public reporting as consistent with prosecutorial discretion, though it drew commentary from political and public spheres given the high-profile nature of the case. In my opinion, the trial illustrates a capacity of meticulous, evidence-driven approach to resolve even the most complex criminal cases. The combination of digital tracking, forensic precision, and methodical collection of physical evidence allowed the legal system to establish a compelling narrative that could withstand scrutiny, while also highlighting the critical importance of early preservation of perishable evidence. The case also underscores a broader societal implication: that routine vigilance, combined with institutional responsiveness, can transform what might otherwise be a chaotic and unresolved disappearance into a definitive legal resolution. From a human perspective, the trial reinforced the stark reality of how ordinary routines can intersect with criminal opportunity, yet simultaneously demonstrate the effectiveness of coordinated investigative and judicial processes in delivering accountability. The conclusion of the trial and sentencing of Jose Antonio Ibarra marked a formal end to the judicial proceedings in the Laken Riley homicide, but did not resolve the broader societal and personal ramifications of the crime. Public attention remained intense in the weeks following conviction. Media coverage emphasized both the meticulous investigative work and the failures and oversight that had allowed Ibarra to remain at large prior to the homicide. The case became a focal point for debate surrounding immigration enforcement, public safety measures, and procedural gaps in law enforcement monitoring, particularly as it pertained to prior offenses and parole conditions. Within the immediate community, responses reflected both relief and continued trauma. Riley's family issued statements emphasizing her grief and the ongoing void left by her death. Friends, classmates, and roommates described her struggle to process the violence she had endured, often highlighting her predictable routines and the ordinary circumstances under which the crime occurred. University administrators initiated reviews of campus safety protocols, including trail surveillance, emergency communication procedures, and public awareness campaigns. While these measures were intended to prevent future incidents, they could not undo the harm suffered by Riley or her household. At the policy level, the case prompted legislative attention. Public reporting indicated that Georgia Representative Mike Collins introduced the Laken Riley Act, aimed at strengthening detention requirements for certain immigrants with prior criminal infractions. The proposal generated both support and criticism. Advocates emphasized the potential for enhanced public safety and prevention of similar crimes, while critics argued that it risked conflating the actions of a single individual with broader immigrant populations. The law's passage in the state legislature highlighted the intersection of individual criminal acts and public policy response, demonstrating how high-profile cases can influence legislative agendas and public discourse. Investigative agencies also reflected on procedural elements of the case. Analysts noted that rapid recovery of digital evidence, combined with coordinated interagency communication, have been essential to the identification and apprehension of a suspect. The timing of data collection, preservation of forensic materials, and strategic surveillance placement all contributed to the clarity of the investigative record. At the same time, previous encounters with law enforcement, particularly arrests and releases in New York and prior parole conditions, were scrutinized as missed opportunities to intervene before the homicide. This led to internal discussions regarding procedural improvements and potential systemic reforms in both state and federal contexts. From a human perspective, the aftermath emphasized the enduring psychological and emotional impact of violent crime. Survivors and family members are often confronted with an ongoing process of coping that extends far beyond legal resolution. In my opinion, this case demonstrates how accountability through the justice system, while necessary, cannot fully reconcile the personal and communal harm inflicted by a violent act. It also highlights a fundamental tension. Society relies on structured legal processes to adjudicate criminal behavior, yet these mechanisms cannot always mitigate the trauma experienced in the immediate aftermath. The Riley case serves as both a cautionary tale and a testament to methodical law enforcement. It underscores the importance of rapid evidence preservation, interagency collaboration, and careful forensic documentation. Yet it also reflects the limitations inherent in addressing societal vulnerabilities and human loss. The aftermath remains layered. While legal justice was achieved through conviction and sentencing, the emotional, social, and policy-related consequences continue to unfold. From my perspective, these enduring effects highlight the complex interplay between individual criminal acts and the broader structures designed to respond to them, reminding us that justice, while tangible in courts, does not fully resolve human experience of tragedy. The homicide of Laken Riley remains a singularly tragic event that encapsulates both the capabilities and limitations of modern investigative processes. From the initial reports of her disappearance on February 22, 2024, to the apprehension, trial, and conviction of Jose Antonio Ibarra, the case illustrates a capacity of coordinated law enforcement, forensic science, and digital evidence construct a detailed and compelling narrative of criminal activity. The combination of GPS tracking, smartwatch data, doorbell camera footage, and DNA analysis allowed investigators to establish a high degree of certainty regarding the sequence of events, the identity of the perpetrator, and the mechanisms of the attack. The circumstances of Riley's routine, which included morning runs along well-used trails, underscore the unpredictability of criminal opportunity. The attack was both sudden and violent, disrupting a familiar, ordinary activity and demonstrating how situational vulnerability can intersect with criminal intent. Forensic analysis indicated that Riley suffered blunt force trauma in conjunction with asphyxiation, while digital records documented the brief SOS call she initiated and precise cessation of her movement. These details were critical in reconstructing the events and, ultimately, in linking Ibarra to the crime with a preponderance of evidence. The deliberate preservation and examination of physical evidence, including the blood-stained jacket, disposable gloves, and hairs forcibly removed from the victim, serve as pivotal elements in establishing both presence and intent. The conviction of Jose Antonio Ibarra, resulting in life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, represented a formal closure in the legal sense. Nevertheless, the broader aftermath extends beyond courtrooms and sentencing hearings. Public discourse highlighted gaps in prior law enforcement engagement with the suspect, including prior arrests and missed opportunity for detention, which led to discussions surrounding immigration policy, public safety protocols, and systemic oversight. Legislators and policymakers referenced the case as evidence in debates over detention standards for non-citizens with prior offenses, illustrating how a single criminal act can influence broader societal conversations and legal frameworks. From a personal perspective, this case emphasizes the limits of judicial resolution in addressing the human experience of loss. While the evidence presented in court was incontrovertible, the emotional, psychological, and social consequences for Riley's family, friends, and a community remain ongoing. Grieving processes cannot be measured by legal milestones, and a disruption caused by such a violent act persists long after conviction. In my opinion, the human element of tragedy in cases like this is as instructive as the procedural and forensic successes. It underscores the importance of preventive measures, community awareness, and institutional vigilance in reducing opportunities for similar crimes. Additionally, the case demonstrates the evolving role of digital surveillance and forensic technology in contemporary criminal investigations. While physical evidence has always been central to establishing culpability, the integration of digital timelines and GPS data provided a level of precision that may not have been attainable in previous decades. Yet, even with these advances, the case also highlights the necessity of human judgment, coordination, and decision-making in applying the technology effectively. Ultimately, the killing of Laken Riley remains unresolved in terms of its emotional and societal impact. The probability suggests that her absence will continue to resonate in her community and family, without the possibility of physical reconciliation. While the perpetrator has been held accountable through legal means, the broader consequences, policy debates, emotional trauma, and questions of preventive oversight are likely to endure. From my perspective, this case serves as a reminder that justice in court can coexist with unresolved human grief, and that a complete understanding of tragedy requires acknowledgement of both evidentiary clarity and the enduring emotional landscape that follows. Laken Riley's story, while closed legally, continues to serve as a cautionary narrative, a study in investigative methodology, and a human lesson in the consequences of unforeseen violence.